Commander Keth Varnol watched his screen with growing excitement. After 3 months of deep space exploration, his ship had finally found something interesting. The object moving toward them was clearly artificial. It had the smooth lines of intelligent design, but it looked different from any ship he had seen before. "Commander," called his science officer, "the vessel is responding to our greeting signals. They are trying to communicate." Keth Varnol felt his heart beat faster. In all his years of service to the Galactic Confederation, he had never made first contact with a new species. Most civilizations had already joined the peaceful alliance that had kept the galaxy stable for over 300 years. The communication system crackled to life. A strange voice spoke in broken galactic standard. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Do-hyun of the human exploration ship Soul's Pride. We come in peace and wish to learn about your people." "Human," Keth Varnol repeated the word slowly. He had never heard of this species before. "This is Commander Keth Varnol of the Velthari research vessel Peaceful Dawn. We welcome you, humans. Would you like to meet face to face?" "That would be an honor, Commander," came the reply. 2 hours later, Keth Varnol stood in his ship's main docking bay. The human vessel had attached to theirs with surprising skill. The airlock opened and 3 figures stepped through. The first was clearly their leader. He was tall for his species, with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He wore a uniform that was practical rather than decorative. This had to be Captain Do-hyun. Behind him came a shorter human with longer hair tied back neatly. She carried several devices that looked like scientific instruments. Her eyes showed the same curiosity that Keth Varnol felt. The third human was younger and stayed alert, his hand resting near what was clearly a weapon. This made Keth Varnol slightly uncomfortable, but many species carried protection during first contact meetings. "Commander Keth Varnol," Captain Do-hyun said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for welcoming us. This is Dr. Hai-wan, our specialist in meeting new species, and Lieutenant Tae-min, my security officer." Keth Varnol bowed in return. "Welcome aboard the Peaceful Dawn. We are honored to meet the first humans we have ever encountered. Please come to our meeting room. We have much to discuss." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Dr. Hai-wan asked many questions about Velthari culture and technology. She seemed especially interested in how the Confederation maintained peace between so many different species. "We learned long ago that war brings only suffering," Keth Varnol explained. "All Confederation species gave up violence centuries ago. We solve our problems through discussion and compromise." He noticed the 3 humans exchange quick glances at this statement, but they said nothing. In the meeting room, they shared information about their respective civilizations. The humans came from a planet called Earth, located in what they called the Milky Way galaxy's Orion arm. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. "Your technology is fascinating," Dr. Hai-wan said, examining a Velthari datapad. "Very elegant and efficient." "Thank you," Keth Varnol replied. "Though I must say your ship's design is quite interesting too. It seems very robust." Captain Do-hyun smiled. "Humans tend to build things to last. We've learned that space can be dangerous." "Dangerous?" Keth Varnol asked. "But surely any species advanced enough for space travel would be peaceful." Again the humans exchanged those strange looks. "Not always, Commander," Captain Do-hyun said quietly. Their pleasant conversation was interrupted by an urgent beep from Keth Varnol's communication device. His first officer's voice came through, filled with panic. "Commander, we're receiving a distress signal from the Velthari colony on Kepler Prime. They're under attack." Keth Varnol's purple skin turned pale. "Under attack? By whom?" "Unknown ships, sir. The colonists say the attackers are using weapons and destroying buildings. Many Velthari are dead, sir." The word hung in the air like poison. Death from violence was almost unknown among Confederation species. Keth Varnol felt sick and confused. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Who would do such a thing?" Captain Do-hyun's expression had changed completely. His casual friendliness was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Commander, can you show us the distress signal data?" "Of course, but I don't understand why anyone would show us," the human captain interrupted, his voice carrying new authority. They moved to the ship's command center. On the main screen, broken transmissions from Kepler Prime painted a horrible picture. Strange ships with aggressive designs were bombarding the peaceful colony. The attackers were tall, gray-skinned beings with sharp features and blood-red eyes. Dr. Haywan studied the images with clinical interest. Looks like a new species, probably from outside Confederation space. Military formation suggests a hierarchical society with aggressive expansion tendencies. Lieutenant Tai Min was already working on his portable device. Ship designs indicate advanced weapons systems. They're not here to negotiate. Kethavar Knoll stared at them in amazement. How do you know all this just from looking at them? Experience, Captain Do-hyun said simply. Commander, does the Confederation have military forces to defend the colony? Military forces? Kethavar Knoll repeated the alien concept. We have defense protocols, ancient systems that haven't been used in centuries, but we don't have anyone trained in what you call military action. The three humans looked at each other again, and this time Kethavar Knoll could read their expressions clearly. They were making a decision. Commander, Captain Do-hyun said slowly, we can help you. Humans know war. Those 4 words sent a chill through Kethavar Knoll's body. The way the human said them was not boastful or proud. It was a simple statement of fact, like saying humans need air, or humans eat food. But there was something in Captain Do-hyun's eyes that made the Velthari commander suddenly afraid. What do you mean? Kethavar Knoll asked. We mean that while your people learn to live in peace, humans learn something else. Dr. Haywan explained gently. We learned how to survive when others want to hurt us, and sometimes that means hurting them first. Lieutenant Taemin was already speaking into his communication device in rapid human language. Within minutes, he looked up. Admiral Yoon Seo's task force is 6 hours away. She's bringing enough firepower to handle this situation. 6 hours? Kethavar Knoll gasped. How could your ships get here so quickly? Human ships are always ready to move fast when there's trouble, Captain Do-hyun said. Commander, we're going to save your colony, but you should know something about humans before we begin. Kethavar Knoll waited, though part of him didn't want to hear what came next. We're very good at war, the human captain continued. Better than we probably should be. And once we start fighting, we don't stop until we win. As if to prove his point, the human ship Soul's Pride suddenly came alive with new energy. Weapons that had been hidden behind innocent-looking panels began to emerge. The exploration vessel transformed before Kethavar Knoll's eyes into something that looked very much like a predator. For the first time in his life, Commander Kethavar Knoll began to understand that the galaxy might not be as safe as he had always believed, and that the humans who had seemed so friendly might be the most dangerous species he had ever met. The human fleet arrived exactly when Captain Do-hyun had promised. Kethavar Knoll watched from his ship's observation deck as 6 human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They moved with perfect coordination, forming a battle formation that looked both beautiful and terrifying. The lead ship was twice the size of Soul's Pride. Its hull was dark gray, covered with sensors and weapons that Kethavar Knoll didn't recognize. Unlike Confederation ships, which were built for exploration and comfort, these human vessels looked like they were designed for only one purpose: war. Commander Kethavar Knoll. A new voice came over the communication system. This is Admiral Yoon Seo of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Captain Do-hyun has told me about your situation. We're here to help. The voice belonged to a woman, but it carried the same cold authority that Kethavar Knoll had heard from Captain Do-hyun. When her image appeared on the screen, he saw a human female with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a uniform covered with symbols that probably meant she had fought many battles. Admiral, Kethavar Knoll said, we are grateful for your offer of help, but I must ask, how did you get here so quickly? And how did you know to bring warships? Admiral Yoon Seo smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Commander, humans learned long ago to always be ready for trouble. We have ships stationed throughout this region of space. When Do-hyun sent word about hostile contacts, we moved immediately. You have military ships everywhere? Kethavar Knoll asked, feeling more confused. Not everywhere, the Admiral replied. Just anywhere there might be people who need protection. Captain Do-hyun had stayed on the Velthari ship to help coordinate the rescue mission. Now he stood beside Kethavar Knoll, watching the human fleet prepare for battle. Admiral, what's the tactical situation at Kepler Prime? Not good, Do-hyun. The attackers have 12 heavy assault ships and they're systematically destroying the colony. They call themselves the Krath Empire. Our intelligence suggests they're testing Confederation defenses to see how we respond. Dr. Haywan looked up from her data analysis. Commander, can you tell us more about these Krath? Any previous contact with your people? Kethvar Null shook his head. We've never heard of them. All species in this region are part of the Confederation. We don't understand where they came from or why they would attack peaceful colonists. They're from outside your space, Lieutenant Taman said, studying his tactical displays. Probably from the Galactic Rim. Ship design suggests they've been expanding their territory for decades. Expanding territory? Kethvar Null repeated. But why would anyone want to take someone else's world? The three humans stared at him in silence. Finally, Dr. Haywan spoke gently. Commander, not all species evolve the same way. Some learn to share and cooperate. Others learn to take what they need from whoever is weaker. That's horrible, Kethvar Null whispered. Yes, Admiral Yunseo's voice came from the speaker. It is. That's why species like humans exist. To stop species like the Krath. A new figure appeared on Kethvar Null's ship, a human male who moved with the fluid grace of a natural hunter. He wore different clothing than the others, all black with equipment that looked designed for stealth and violence. Commander Kethvar Null, Captain Do-hyun said, "This is Colonel Jae-sung, our Special Operations Leader. He'll be coordinating the ground assault to rescue your colonists." Colonel Jae-sung bowed respectfully, but his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every detail of his surroundings. Commander, we need to discuss how to approach this situation. The Krath have taken hostages. Your people are being held in the colony's central square. Then we must negotiate for their release, Kethvar Null said immediately. Surely we can find some compromise that— No, Colonel Jae-sung interrupted quietly. The Krath aren't interested in negotiation. They're using your people as bait to draw in more Confederation forces. Once they have a bigger target, they'll kill the hostages and attack the rescue ships. How do you know this? Kethvar Null demanded. Because it's what I would do, the colonel replied without emotion. It's a standard tactic when you want to inflict maximum psychological damage on a peaceful population. Dr. Haywan saw Kethvar Null's horrified expression and tried to explain. Commander, humans have been studying warfare for thousands of years. We understand how aggressive species think because we've fought them before. You've fought wars against your own kind? Kethvar Null asked. Many wars, Captain Do-hyun admitted. For most of our history, humans fought other humans. We learned every possible way to hurt, trick, and defeat each other. It made us very good at understanding violence. Engineer Bonhua materialized on the ship via transportation beam, carrying several devices that made Kethvar Null nervous. Colonel, the weapons modifications are complete. We can disable their shields without damaging the hostage area. Good work, Bonhua, Colonel Jae-sung said. What about their communication systems? Easy target. I can make their ships think they're getting orders from their own command while actually feeding them false information. Kethvar Null felt sick. You're talking about deception. Lying to them? Yes, the engineer said simply. Humans are very good at lying when we need to be. It saves lives. Whose lives? Kethvar Null asked. The right ones, Colonel Jae-sung replied. Admiral Yunseo's voice cut through the tension. All ships prepare for combat operations. Kethvar Null, I recommend you keep your vessel at a safe distance. This is going to get messy. Messy? The Velthari commander asked. Captain Do-hyun looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Commander, war isn't clean or pretty. People die. Sometimes good people die to save other good people. Sometimes bad people die because they won't stop hurting good people. Humans learned to accept this reality a long time ago. But surely there must be another way, Kethvar Null pleaded. Maybe there is, Dr. Haywan said kindly. But your colonists don't have time for us to find it. They're dying right now while we talk. As if to prove her point, another weak transmission came from Kepler Prime. A Velthari voice, full of pain and fear, begged for help. In the background, harsh alien voices could be heard giving orders in a language that sounded like grinding metal. The sound galvanized the humans into action. Suddenly, the peaceful explorers transformed into something else entirely. Captain Do-hyun's casual demeanor disappeared, replaced by crisp military efficiency. Dr. Haywan's scientific curiosity became cold analysis of enemy weaknesses. Lieutenant Taman's alertness became focused aggression. Colonel, Admiral Yunseo commanded, you have authorization for full tactical assault. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Priority is hostage rescue. Secondary objective is enemy vessel capture for intelligence gathering. Understood, Admiral. Colonel J. Sung replied. Estimated time to target 18 minutes. Estimated casualties among friendlies less than 5%. Estimated enemy survivors 0. 0? Kethvar Null gasped. You mean to kill them all? The colonel looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. Commander, the Krath kill for pleasure. They torture civilians for information they don't need. They take hostages not for negotiation, but to cause maximum suffering. These aren't people who made a mistake. These are predators. And humans know how to deal with predators, Captain Do-hyun added grimly. We learned how by being predators ourselves. As the human fleet moved toward Kepler Prime, Kethvar Null realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was wrong. Peace wasn't the natural state of intelligent species. It was something that had to be protected. And sometimes it had to be protected by those who understood violence better than anyone else. The humans were offering to save his people, but Kethvar Null was beginning to understand that accepting their help meant accepting a terrible truth. Sometimes, survival required becoming the monster that other monsters feared. The battle began before Kethvar Null even realized it had started. He stood on the bridge of Admiral Yoon Seo's flagship, watching the tactical displays show the approach to Kepler Prime. The human fleet moved in a formation that looked random to his eyes, but he could see now that every ship had a specific purpose and position. First contact in 30 seconds, reported Major Yoonji, the human intelligence officer. She had been monitoring Krath communications since they arrived, and Kethvar Null was amazed by how quickly she had learned their language. What are they saying? He asked. They're confused, Major Yoonji replied with satisfaction. Their scouts reported 6 human ships, but their sensors are showing different numbers depending on which ship looks. We're feeding false data into their detection systems. How is that possible? Humans learned long ago that winning a fight isn't just about having bigger weapons, Admiral Yoon Seo explained without taking her eyes off the tactical display. It's about making the enemy make mistakes. On the screen, Kethvar Null could see the Krath fleet. 12 large ships surrounded the Velthari colony like predators circling wounded prey. The ships were built for intimidation, covered with spikes and aggressive angles that served no functional purpose except to frighten their enemies. They're trying to scare us, Lieutenant Taemin observed. Is it working? Kethvar Null asked nervously. Captain Do-hyun, who had joined them on the flagship, smiled coldly. Commander, humans invented psychological warfare. These amateurs are about to learn how it's really done. Suddenly, the Krath ships began firing on each other. What's happening? Kethvar Null gasped. Major Yoonji looked up from her communication station with obvious pride. I've been intercepting their messages and sending new ones. Half their fleet thinks the other half is about to betray them. They're so busy fighting each other they've forgotten about us. You made them fight their own people? Yes, the major said simply. It's more efficient than fighting all of them ourselves. While the Krath ships were distracted by their sudden civil war, Colonel Jae Sung's assault teams were already moving. Kethvar Null watched in amazement as small human ships, almost invisible to sensors, slipped past the confused Krath fleet and landed near the colony. Teams are on the ground, reported Sergeant Kehoe from the surface. Colony Center is heavily fortified, but we found their supply depot. Looks like they're planning to stay here for a while. Negative on extended occupation. Colonel Jae Sung's voice crackled through the communication system. Destroy the depot. Sir, there are about 300 Krath soldiers guarding it. I didn't ask for a head count, Sergeant. I gave you an order. Kethvar Null felt sick. 300 lives? 300 enemy soldiers who are helping hold your colonists hostage, Captain Do-hyun corrected. Sergeant Kehoe isn't going to murder them. He's going to remove them as a threat to innocent people. But surely some of them could surrender. Admiral Yoon Seo finally looked at him. Commander, has any Krath soldier tried to surrender? Have any of them shown mercy to your colonists? Have any of them tried to negotiate or find a peaceful solution? Kethvar Null had no answer. The intercepted Krath communications had shown only cruelty and contempt for Velthari life. The depot is rigged, Sergeant Kehoe reported. When their reinforcements arrive, they'll get a surprise. What kind of surprise? Kethvar Null asked, though he was afraid to know. The kind that ends problems permanently, the sergeant replied. As if summoned by his words, A group of Krath fighters began racing toward their supply depot. They had broken off from the confused fleet battle and were moving to reinforce their ground troops. Kethvar Noll watched the Krath fighters approach the depot. Part of him wanted to warn them, even though he knew they were the enemy. They were living beings and they had no idea what was waiting for them. The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire planet's surface. Depot destroyed, Sergeant Kehoe reported calmly. Enemy reinforcements eliminated. Proceeding to Phase 2. How many? Kethvar Noll whispered. How many what, Commander? Captain Dohyun asked. How many of them died? The human captain was quiet for a moment. Does it matter? Of course it matters. They were alive. So are your colonists, Admiral Yunseo pointed out. And thanks to Sergeant Kehoe, more of your people will stay alive. Major Unji looked up from her station. Commander, the Krath aren't like your people. They don't value life the way you do. To them, killing your colonists is entertainment. They're broadcasting the executions to their homeworlds as a form of popular media. That's impossible, Kethvar Noll said. I can show you the transmissions if you want, the Major offered, though I don't recommend it. Before Kethvar Noll could answer, Colonel Jae-sung's voice came through the speakers. Admiral, we have eyes on the hostages. Krath are using them as human shields around their command center. They've got explosive charges set to kill all the colonists if we make a direct assault. Options? Admiral Yunseo asked. We go in quiet. My team can neutralize the guards and disable the charges. But we need a distraction to draw their attention away from the hostages. You'll have it, the Admiral promised. Major Unji, can you make the Krath fleet think they're winning? Already on it, the intelligence officer replied. I'm sending them fake damage reports from our ships. They think they're destroying us. On the tactical display, Kethvar Noll watched the remaining Krath ships break off their internal fighting and begin celebrating their apparent victory. They had no idea that the human ships they thought they had destroyed were actually repositioning for the final attack. This is wrong, Kethvar Noll said quietly. War should be honorable. Warriors should face each other openly. Dr. Hae-won, who had been monitoring the rescue operation, looked at him with something like pity. Commander, honor is a luxury that people with superior numbers can afford. When you're trying to save innocent lives against impossible odds, honor becomes less important than results. But what about their rights? Their chance to surrender? They gave up those rights when they started murdering civilians, Captain Dohyun said coldly. The Krath made this a war of extermination. We're just better at extermination than they are. Suddenly, alarms began sounding on the Krath ships. Colonel Jae-sung's assault teams had breached their command center. Hostages secured, the colonel reported. Charges disabled. All Velthari colonists are alive and safe. Kethvar Noll felt relief flood through him. His people were safe, but the feeling was immediately replaced by horror as he realized what would happen next. Excellent work, Colonel, Admiral Yunseo said. All ships weapons free. Clean sweep authorized. Wait, Kethvar Noll shouted. The battle is over. Your people rescued the hostages. There's no need for more killing. The humans all looked at him with expressions he couldn't read. Commander, Admiral Yunseo said patiently, the Krath came here to test your defenses and kill your people. If we let them go home, they'll just come back with bigger fleets and better plans. This ends here. Or it ends with the genocide of your entire species. But some of them might change. Some of them might learn. Maybe, Captain Dohyun agreed. But your colonists can't wait for the Krath to have a change of heart. Neither can the other innocent species they'll attack next week. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that turned night into day around Kepler Prime. The remaining Krath ships, caught completely off guard, managed only a few desperate shots before they were destroyed. It was over in less than 3 minutes. Threat neutralized, Admiral Yunseo announced. All Krath forces eliminated. Colonial area secure. Kethvar Noll stared at the empty space where the enemy fleet had been. Hundreds of living beings had just ceased to exist, and the humans seemed no more affected by it than if they had swept dust from a table. How do you live with it? He asked quietly. By remembering who we're protecting, Dr. Hae-won replied. And by making sure we only kill the people who won't stop trying to kill innocents. As rescue ships moved down to evacuate the traumatized Velthari colonists, Kethvar Noll realized he had witnessed something that would change his understanding of the universe forever. Humans didn't just fight wars. They won them with a completeness that was both terrifying and reassuring. The galaxy was not as safe as he had believed, but perhaps with allies like these strange, violent humans, it could be safer than it had ever been before. 6 months later, HFY Story stood before the Grand Council of the Galactic Confederation. Representatives from 43 species filled the Great Assembly Hall on the capital world of Harmony Prime. They had all come to hear his report about humanity and decide whether these strange new aliens should be welcomed into their peaceful alliance. The council leader, an ancient being from the Althari species, gestured for silence. Commander HFY Story, you have spent considerable time with the humans. The council requires your assessment of their character and intentions. Are they suitable for membership in our confederation? HFY Story took a deep breath. Everything he said today would determine the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. He had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, he hardly knew where to begin. Honored council members, he began, I have indeed spent much time with humans. I have seen them in peace and in war. I have witnessed their capacity for both creation and destruction. What I must tell you will disturb many of you, but it is the truth as I have observed it. He activated his holographic display, showing images from the battle at Kepler Prime. The council members shifted uncomfortably as they saw the destruction of the Krath fleet. Humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They achieved interstellar travel not despite their violent nature, but because of it. They are predators who became civilized without losing their predatory instincts. A representative from the peaceful Thanari species stood up. Commander, are you saying they are dangerous to us? I am saying they are dangerous, period, HFY Story replied. The question is whether that danger serves our interests or threatens them. He changed the display to show the aftermath of the human victory. Felthari colonists being evacuated safely, medical aid being provided, reconstruction beginning immediately. When the Krath Empire attacked our colony, the Confederation had no means to respond. Our defense protocols were centuries out of date. Our ships were not designed for combat. Our people had no training in warfare. We would have lost thousands of lives before we could organize any kind of rescue. But the humans responded in hours. They arrived with ships designed for war, crews trained for violence, and minds that understood conflict better than we understand peace. The council leader leaned forward. Commander, we understand that humans helped in this crisis, but what concerns us is their methods. Reports suggest they used deception, destroyed enemies who might have surrendered, and showed no mercy to defeated foes. HFY Story had expected this question. Honored council leader, I asked myself the same questions. I was horrified by human tactics. I couldn't understand how they could be so casual about taking lives. He paused, remembering his conversations with the human officers. Then I learned about their history. Humans evolved on a world where survival required constant vigilance against threats that wanted to destroy them completely. They learned that showing mercy to enemies who would never show mercy in return was a form of suicide. A new voice interrupted him. The massive form of Fleet Admiral Hyan Wu materialized in the chamber via hologram. The human military commander had been invited to address the council directly. Honored representatives, the admiral began. I understand your concerns about humanity's violent nature. You should be concerned. We are violent. We are aggressive. We solve problems through the application of overwhelming force. Several council members made sounds of distress. But, the admiral continued, we are violent in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. We are aggressive toward those who threaten the innocent. We apply overwhelming force to end conflicts quickly rather than let them drag on for years. He activated his own display, showing star maps that made HFY Story gasp. The entire Krath Empire was marked in red, but the red was fading, being replaced by neutral gray. 6 weeks ago, human forces launched a preemptive strike against the Krath Empire. We destroyed their invasion fleet before it could attack Confederation worlds. We eliminated their military leadership. We occupied their home systems. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. You destroyed an entire civilization? The council leader demanded. No, Admiral Hyan Wu replied calmly. We destroyed their ability to wage war against innocent species. Krath civilians were relocated to suitable worlds where they can build a peaceful society under Confederation oversight. Their military forces were eliminated because they refused to surrender. But that's... A Thanari representative sputtered. That's exactly what the Krath would have done to us. Yes, the Admiral agreed. The difference is that we stopped there. The Krath would have exterminated every non-Krath in the galaxy given enough time. We removed the threat and protected the civilians. That's what humans do. Ambassador So Young, humanity's diplomatic representative, stepped forward. She was smaller than the military officers Keth Varnol had met, but her presence filled the chamber just as completely. Honored Council, she said. Humanity requests membership in the Galactic Confederation, not because we need your protection, but because you need ours. The galaxy is not the safe place you believe it to be. She activated a display showing the positions of unexplored regions beyond Confederation, space. Our deep space scouts have detected at least 3 other aggressive civilizations similar to the Krath Empire. They are all expanding toward Confederation territory. Your peaceful alliance is surrounded by predators who see your prosperity as something to be taken. What do you propose? The council leader asked quietly. Partnership, Ambassador So Young replied. Humans will provide military protection for Confederation worlds. In return, we ask for membership in your alliance and access to your technology, culture, and wisdom. We want to learn how to be better than we are. And if we refuse, asked the Althari representative. Then you face the next Krath Empire alone, Admiral Hyan Wu said bluntly. And the one after that. And the one after that. Eventually, you will encounter threats that even humans cannot protect you from. But together, we have a chance to build something that can defend itself. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Keth Varnol listened to representatives argue about human morality, the necessity of violence, and the price of protection. Finally, the council leader called for his final recommendation. Commander Keth Varnol, she said, you have heard all arguments. What is your assessment? Should humanity be admitted to the Confederation? Keth Varnol looked around the chamber at the faces of 43 species that had achieved peace by forgetting how to fight. Then he looked at the human representatives who had achieved peace by becoming better at fighting than anyone else. Honored Council, he began, I have spent months trying to understand humans. I have watched them plan wars with the same precision that we plan scientific expeditions. I have seen them kill their enemies without hesitation or regret. I have witnessed them use tactics that horrify every moral instinct we possess. He paused, seeing nods of agreement from several representatives. I have also seen them risk their lives to save strangers they had just met. I have watched them mourn for enemies who showed them no mercy. I have observed them build schools and hospitals on worlds they conquered from aggressors. Another pause. Humans are what we might have become if we had chosen a different evolutionary path. They are living proof that intelligence and compassion can coexist with the capacity for absolute violence. They scare me more than any species I have ever encountered. The chamber was completely silent. And that is exactly why we need them, Keth Varnol concluded. The universe is not a safe place for good people. It requires people who can be as ruthless as the evil they fight against, but who choose to use that ruthlessness in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The terrifying truth I have learned is this. Peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is what happens when the good people are better at violence than the bad people. Humans are very, very good at violence. The question is not whether they are dangerous, they are. The question is whether we want that danger pointed at our enemies or left to decide for itself who the enemy is. I recommend accepting humanity into the Confederation immediately, with full membership and complete access to all member benefits, not because they need us, but because we desperately need them. The vote was closer than Keth Varnol had hoped, but humanity was accepted into the Galactic Confederation by a margin of 26 species to 17. 3 weeks later, human ships took up defensive positions around every major Confederation world. The galaxy was safer than it had ever been, protected by a species that understood war so completely they could prevent it before it started. Keth Varnol completed his final report as he watched a human patrol fleet transit through Velthari space. The ships moved with the same deadly grace he had first witnessed months ago, but now they were moving to protect his people rather than simply passing through. The terrifying truth about humans, he wrote, was that they were exactly what the galaxy needed, even if no one wanted to admit it. They were guardians who had evolved from predators, protectors who could think like destroyers, and peacekeepers who understood that sometimes peace required war. As he transmitted his report to the Confederation archives, 3 days after the battle at Kepler Prime, HFY Knoll sat in the human ship's library with Dr. Myung-ho, a human scientist who specialized in studying the history of war. The Velthari commander had requested this meeting because he needed to understand what he had witnessed. "You want to know why humans are so good at violence?" Dr. Myung-ho said, settling into his chair with a cup of something that smelled bitter but energizing. "It's a fair question, Commander. Most species find us disturbing. I don't understand how your people became this way," HFY Knoll admitted. "Every other species in the Confederation evolved beyond violence before they reached the stars. How did humans achieve space travel while still being warriors?" Dr. Myung-ho smiled sadly. "Because we didn't evolve beyond violence, Commander. We evolved because of violence." He activated a holographic display that showed images from human history. HFY Knoll saw scenes of humans hunting massive creatures with primitive weapons, fighting each other with metal tools, and building increasingly sophisticated methods of destruction. Most species faced one type of challenge during their evolution, Dr. Myung-ho explained. Climate change, natural disasters, resource scarcity. Humans faced all of those, plus something else, each other. You fought your own kind? Constantly. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans competed with other humans for food, territory, mates, and resources. Every tribe that survived had to be better at violence than the tribes that didn't. The holographic display showed human settlements growing larger and more complex, but also showed the weapons and fortifications that protected them becoming more sophisticated. "This is horrible," HFY Knoll whispered. "Yes and no," Dr. Myung-ho replied. "It was horrible for the individuals who lived through it. But it created evolutionary pressure that made humans incredibly adaptable. We learned to think like our enemies because our enemies were exactly like us." Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin joined them in the library. She was the human tactical analyst who had predicted the Krath Empire's strategies with frightening accuracy. "Dr. Myung-ho is being modest," she said, settling into a chair. "Human evolution didn't just make us good at violence. It made us good at thinking." "What do you mean?" HFY Knoll asked. "When you're trying to outwit an enemy who thinks exactly like you do, you have to become very creative," Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin explained. "Humans developed complex language, advanced tool use, and sophisticated social cooperation, all because we needed these things to defeat other humans who were trying to kill us." She activated her own display, showing human military formations throughout history. "See how our tactics evolved? We didn't just learn to fight. We learned to anticipate what our enemies would do, then plan 3 steps ahead of them. That's how you knew what the Krath would do? Partly, but it's deeper than that." Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin's expression became serious. "Humans are persistence hunters, Commander. Do you know what that means?" HFY Knoll shook his head. "It means our ancestors hunted by following prey animals until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. We're not the fastest or strongest predators, but we never give up. We just keep coming until our target can't run anymore." "We brought that same approach to warfare," Dr. Myung-ho added. "Humans don't just win battles. We win wars by making our enemies believe that fighting us will cost more than surrendering to us." "But surely not all humans are violent," HFY Knoll protested. "Dr. Haewon seems very peaceful. So does Captain Do-hyun when he's not in combat." "That's the most frightening thing about us," Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin said quietly. "Every human has the capacity for violence. Even the gentlest human can become a killer if the right buttons are pushed. We all carry the genetic memory of survivors." Dr. Myung-ho pulled up another display, this one showing human brain scans. "See these areas? They're enlarged in humans compared to most species. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, and strategic planning. Human brains are literally built for warfare. And unlike other species, we never stopped fighting," Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin continued. "Most civilizations had 1 or 2 major wars in their history, then learned to cooperate. Humans had constant warfare right up until we reached space. Even now, different human governments sometimes fight each other." "That's insane," HFY Knoll said. "Maybe. But it keeps us sharp. A human military that hasn't fought a real war in 50 years starts getting soft and making mistakes. That's why we rotate our forces through conflict zones and run constant training exercises." A communication chime interrupted their conversation. The voice of Admiral Yun Seo came through the speakers. "All senior staff to the briefing room. We have new intelligence about the Krath Empire." In the briefing room, HFY Knoll found himself surrounded by human officers who all showed the same alert, predatory awareness. They moved like hunters who had caught an interesting scent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Yunseo began, "our analysis of captured Krath communications has revealed something disturbing. The attack on Kepler Prime wasn't random aggression. It was a reconnaissance mission. She activated a star map that showed the positions of Confederation worlds. Red markers indicated recent unexplained incidents, communications blackouts, missing ships, and strange sensor readings. The Krath have been probing Confederation defenses for months," the Admiral continued. "They're not just raiders. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion." Captain Do-hyun leaned forward. "How large a force are we talking about?" "Best estimates suggest a battle fleet of over 500 ships, plus support vessels and ground forces numbering in the millions." The room fell silent. Even to Keth of Arnol, who knew nothing about military matters, those numbers sounded overwhelming. The Confederation has no military infrastructure to resist an invasion of that scale, Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin observed. "No," Admiral Yunseo agreed. "They don't. But we do." She changed the display to show human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Keth Varnol was shocked to see how many red dots appeared. Human ships were everywhere, far more than he had imagined. "How many ships do you have?" he asked. "Enough," the Admiral replied. "Humans learned long ago to prepare for the worst possible scenario. We've been building ships and training crews for threats that didn't exist yet. You planned for this?" "We planned for something like this," Captain Do-hyun corrected. "In human history, peaceful periods never last forever. There's always another threat coming. The species that survive are the ones that stay ready." Dr. Myung-ho nodded grimly. "Commander, your Confederation represents 300 years of peace and prosperity. That's wonderful. But it's also made you vulnerable. You forgot that not everyone in the galaxy shares your values." "Humans never forgot," Lieutenant Commander Soo-jin added. "We've been waiting for someone like the Krath to appear. We're actually relieved to finally have a clear threat to fight." "Relieved?" Keth of Arnol asked, horrified. "Humans aren't comfortable during peacetime," Admiral Yunseo explained. "We start getting restless and looking for challenges. It's better for everyone when we have a real enemy to focus on instead of creating problems among ourselves." A new voice joined the conversation as Colonel Jae-sung entered the briefing room. "Admiral, I've been reviewing the Krath battle doctrine. They're planning genocide." "Explain." "Their communications refer to Confederation species as soft prey and breeding stock. This isn't about conquest or territory. They want to exterminate every intelligent species in this part of the galaxy and replace them with Krath colonies." The silence that followed this announcement was different from before. Keth Varnol could feel the change in the room's atmosphere. The humans had shifted from alert interest to something much more dangerous. "How long do we have?" Admiral Yunseo asked. 6 months, maybe less. They're massing their forces at staging areas just outside Confederation space. "Then we'd better get started," the Admiral said. "Colonel, I want complete battle plans for a preemptive strike." "Major Yunji, begin intelligence gathering operations in Krath space." "Captain Do-hyun, start coordinating with Confederation leadership." "Admiral," Keth Varnol interrupted, "what about diplomacy? Perhaps if we try to communicate with the Krath leadership." Every human in the room looked at him with expressions that made his blood freeze. "Commander," Admiral Yunseo said very quietly, "the Krath have made their intentions clear. They want to kill every member of your species and use your worlds for themselves. There is no negotiating with genocide, Paroi, but surely—" "No," Colonel Jae-sung cut him off. "This is what humans understand that you don't. Some enemies can't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or reformed. They can only be defeated so completely that they never threaten innocent people again." As the meeting broke up and the humans began planning their war, Keth Varnol realized that he was witnessing the awakening of something that had been sleeping in human space. These people weren't just soldiers, they were the ultimate evolution of a species that had spent its entire history learning how to survive by defeating others who wanted to destroy them. The Krath Empire thought they were about to prey on a weak, peaceful civilization. They had no idea they were about to face humanity's true nature.